I'm Hannah Colton, 33 years old, and after years of feeling like the outsider in my own family, I thought maybe this time would be different. I'd spent 3 weeks planning a special dinner at my home in Center City, the condo I bought on my own after years of working late nights for freelance clients. I roasted a herb-crusted pork loin, cleaned every corner of the place, and even bought that fancy lemon tart my mom used to love. As we sat down, I smiled, hoping it would finally feel like a real family meal. Not just one I hosted, but one where I belonged. But just as the plates were filled and the wine was poured, my dad leaned back in his chair and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Still living off us." Before we go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and if you've ever had to prove yourself to the people who should have known you best, I'd love to hear your story too. I've always tried to carry my own weight. Growing up in a small house in the northeast side of Philadelphia, my parents made it clear they valued hard work and practicality above all. My dad was a union electrician, always fixing something, never one to waste time or money. My mom worked night shifts at the hospital until her knees gave out. They weren't unkind, but they didn't have much patience for dreams that didn't come with a pension or a paycheck every Friday. When my younger sister Natalie was born, she brought a brightness to the house that everyone seemed to orbit around. She was bubbly and photogenic, a cheerleader in high school, always the center of attention at birthdays and barbecues. I was quieter, more reserved. I spent most of my time sketching alone in my room or helping my mom with chores when she was too tired to stand. After college, I stayed local working jobs that paid the rent while building a small freelance design business on the side. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Over time, that side hustle turned into something sustainable, and by my late 20s, I'd saved enough to put a down payment on a modest but modern 2-bedroom condo downtown. I didn't throw a party or post about it online. I just kept working, kept showing up. When my parents hit retirement with less than they'd hoped for, and Natalie and her husband Eric were expecting Chloe, I offered the condo to them for a small rent, just enough to cover my taxes and maintenance. I thought it was the right thing to do. Family helps family. That's what I told myself every time I swallowed a comment from my dad about real work, or when Natalie would call me lucky for having a place like this. They were living in the most expensive zip code in Philly for a quarter of the market rate, and still they acted like I owed them more. I tried not to let it get to me. I focused on my work, on my relationship with Tyler, and on the rare moments with Chloe that felt like sunshine cutting through a cloudy sky. So when I invited them over for dinner, it wasn't just about catching up. It was about trying again. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me not as the odd one out, but as someone who had built something real. But after that comment from my dad and the sharp laugh from my mom that followed, I felt the heat rise to my face. Natalie and Eric exchanged smirks like they were in on a private joke. Even Chloe looked around confused by the tension, but sensing something was wrong. My roast sat untouched. The dessert stayed in the fridge. I didn't raise my voice or argue. I just stood, pushed my chair back, and walked out the door without saying a word. The sound of my heels on the sidewalk was louder than anything they'd said, and as the night air hit my skin, something inside me shifted. They think I'm still the girl who needs saving. They don't realize what's coming next. After that dinner, I didn't hear from anyone for days. No one followed up to ask if I was okay or why I'd left the table. The silence didn't surprise me. It had always been that way. If I didn't reach out first, no one did. Still, I went about my week working late from my home office and responding to client requests, while the condo I owned just 10 blocks away remained the center of someone else's life. My parents, Natalie, Eric, and little Chloe, had been living there for nearly 2 years. They paid me $600 a month, not even a quarter of what that space could bring in at market rate. But when they asked if they could stay there after my mom retired and Natalie's lease ran out, I didn't hesitate. I told myself it was temporary, just until they got back on their feet. The condo had modern appliances, updated floors, a view of the skyline. I'd worked hard to afford it, saving every dime while they brushed off my work like it was a hobby. My sister always knew how to win them over. Natalie was the kind of person who walked into a room and made people look up. Even as kids, she got the best presents at Christmas, the first slice of cake at every birthday. She worked part-time at a boutique now, mostly running the register and helping customers try on clothes. Eric delivered packages and picked up side jobs when they came through. Between the two of them, money was always tight. They never said it directly, but the expectation was clear. I had space, I had income, and they had a child. The first year I didn't say much. When they were late on rent, I let it slide. When the utilities crept higher because of 4 adults and a child using the space, I covered it. When Chloe started preschool, I even helped with supplies. I figured I was doing what a daughter and a sister should, helping the people who raised me, the people who needed me. But things shifted slowly. A few months before that dinner, I put together a gift for everyone in the condo. Custom art pieces designed by hand, tailored to their favorite colors and interests. I dropped them off one afternoon, proud of what I'd made, hoping to brighten their space a little. My mom barely glanced at hers before setting it aside. My dad didn't even unwrap his. Natalie smiled, said it was sweet, and mentioned putting it in Chloe's room. A week later, I found it still in the hallway closet, unopened. Chloe was the only one who seemed to care. She gave me a hug, held her little framed picture to her chest, and told me she wanted to hang it near her bed. Her voice was so sincere it made my throat tighten. Natalie had a way of reminding me, gently or not, that she and Eric were making it work despite everything. She'd talk about how hard things were at the boutique, how expensive school shoes were for Chloe, how their car kept breaking down. My dad would jump in sometimes and say, "At least you girls turned out okay." All those art classes we paid for weren't a waste after all. My mom would just smile and nod, always backing Natalie, always seeing her as the one doing her best. I never mentioned that I was working 12-hour days most weeks, or that my savings had taken a hit since they moved into the condo, or that I'd passed up better rental offers because I didn't want strangers living there. When I did bring up the market rate once casually over coffee with Natalie, she laughed and said, "Well, that's the price you pay for having a family." Eric, who had been in the other room, shouted something about me needing them more than they needed me. After that, I stopped bringing up the condo, but I started watching. Natalie had begun posting more photos online, carefully staged shots of the living room, the kitchen, the balcony view, always tagging brands and local restaurants. She never mentioned the place was mine. It was all our new place in Center City or Home Sweet Home. She'd even posted a photo of the framed artwork I made for Chloe, writing that it was a gift from a friend. A week later, my dad called and said something needed fixing in the bathroom. I offered to send a repair tech, but he said no, just send the cash, said he'd take care of it. I asked for photos, but he brushed it off. The repair never came up again. When I talked to Tyler about it, he didn't mince words. "They're not just taking advantage, Hannah. They're counting on you not to say anything." He wasn't angry, just clear. We were sitting on my couch, his laptop open beside him, his hand resting lightly on mine. I didn't respond right away. I just stared out the window at the street below, thinking about how long I'd been trying to earn something that maybe was never going to come. A few days later, I stopped by the condo unannounced to drop off something for Chloe. Natalie was there folding laundry on the couch. Eric was playing a game on his phone, his feet up on my coffee table. They barely looked up. Chloe ran to me, arms open, smile wide. She asked if I could help her with her school project, and I sat with her for a few minutes watching her cut out magazine letters and glue them to a poster board. I felt the tension in my shoulders ease just watching her. But as I stood to leave, I glanced back at Natalie. She was scrolling on her phone, laughing at something, not a care in the world. The condo smelled like someone had just made coffee and sprayed a lemon-scented air freshener. It looked good, warm, clean, comfortable. They'd made it home, not theirs, but mine. And for the first time in a long time, I started wondering what would happen if I took it back. After that visit to the condo, something shifted. I didn't say anything out loud, not yet. But inside, I started paying closer attention. It wasn't just the occasional comment or the missed rent payments anymore. It was the way my sister would post about her home online, standing in the kitchen. I'd picked out tile for using my furniture as a backdrop, like it had always belonged to her. She shared photos from the balcony, tagged trendy cafes nearby, dropped hints about designer clothes she couldn't possibly afford on her part-time income. One post had her smiling in front of the entryway, captioned, "Home is where the light hits just right." There wasn't a single mention of me. When my dad called a few weeks later and asked for money to fix a leak, I told him to send me a picture so I could call a contractor. He said it wasn't necessary, said he had it covered. But a few days later, I stopped by and asked about it, and no one seemed to know what I was talking about. I didn't argue. I just made a note of it. My mom still called once in a while, usually on Sunday afternoons, to check in on things like the weather or what I was cooking for dinner. She never brought up rent or the condo unless I did. And when I asked her if they'd thought about finding their own place now that Chloe was getting older, she brushed it off. "This works for us," she said softly. "Besides, you've got the space." I started having trouble sleeping through the night. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, my mind turning over rent costs, utilities, and the widening gap between what they were paying and what they owed. I pulled up my condo's financials more than once, running the numbers over and over, trying to make the math feel fair. It never did. Tyler noticed. One night while we were having dinner at his place, he reached across the table and said, "You've been quiet lately." "What's going on?" I told him everything. Not just about the money, but the way they treated me, the way it never seemed to occur to them that I might be carrying more than just the bills. He listened without interrupting, then leaned back and said, "You've done more than enough, Hannah. It's okay to set limits." I nodded, but the words didn't settle right away. It takes time to admit that the people closest to you might not be thinking about you at all. One Friday evening, I got a text from Tara, a woman who worked with Natalie at the boutique. We weren't close, but we followed each other on social media and had talked at a few holiday events. Her message was short. "Hey, didn't mean to pry, but you might want to see this." Attached was a screenshot of a group chat. Natalie had written a message to a few friends bragging about the condo. She said something like, "We're getting a steal." Hannah's too soft to charge real rent. She thinks she's helping, but she's just easy to manage. I read it twice before the words even made sense. Tara followed up with another message. "I'm sorry if this is overstepping. Just thought you'd want to know." I thanked her, then sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. The lights in my apartment were still on my laptop open, half a project waiting on the screen. I didn't move. It was one thing to suspect they didn't appreciate what I was doing. It was another to see them laugh about it behind my back. I saved the screenshot, then opened the folder where I kept my lease documents. I added it to the file. That night, Tyler called just to check in. I didn't tell him everything, not yet, but hearing his voice made the tightness in my chest ease a little. I told him I might need his help soon. He said, "Whenever you're ready." The next morning, I drove past the condo on my way to pick up groceries. I didn't stop or go inside, but just seeing it from the street made my stomach tighten. The blinds in the front window were pulled crooked. The mailbox was overflowing. There was a delivery box propped against the door, probably for Eric. That afternoon, I found an envelope from the city tucked under my own apartment door. Property tax was due. I ran the numbers again, realized I'd been quietly absorbing the difference every month for nearly 2 years. Not just utilities, but repairs, upgrades, insurance. That same evening, while clearing out a drawer in my office, I came across the original photo I'd taken the day I bought the condo, the empty living room full of light walls, freshly painted hardwood floors gleaming. I looked at it for a long time. I had turned a corner, even if I hadn't said the words out loud yet. They saw me as someone who owed them for childhood favors, for old encouragement, for being part of the same family. They didn't see what it cost me to keep pretending that was okay. The message came on a Tuesday late in the afternoon while I was between meetings. I almost didn't check it right away. It was from Tara again, the same coworker of Natalie's who'd sent that first screenshot. This time there was no preamble, just a photo from a group chat and the words, "Thought you should see this." I tapped the image. The chat window was wide open, my sister's name highlighted in bold. She was telling a friend how sweet the setup was living in a Center City condo for next to nothing. She joked that I was too soft to ask for more. Then she ended with, "We've got this in the bag." I read it once, then again. I sat back in my chair, the quiet hum of my computer suddenly loud in the room. They weren't just grateful and struggling. They were proud of taking advantage of me. I forwarded the screenshot to my personal email and saved it in the folder with the lease documents. The air in the room felt heavier, like something had settled that wasn't going to lift. That night, Tyler came over for dinner. I didn't say much while we cooked, just chopped vegetables and stirred the sauce while he set the table. After we sat down, I pulled up the message on my phone and handed it to him. He scrolled through it slowly, his expression not changing much until he finished reading. He didn't raise his voice or shake his head. He just set the phone down and said, "So what do you want to do?" I didn't answer right away, but something had changed. This time the silence wasn't hesitation, it was focus. The next morning I printed a copy of the screenshot and placed it in a folder with the lease agreement. Then I ran a full financial review on the condo market value, rental comps, recent maintenance expenses. It was worse than I thought. I'd been covering more than just rent gaps. Between taxes, utilities, and repairs, I was losing almost $2,000 a month. I closed the spreadsheet and sat still for a while. The decisions ahead weren't easy, but they felt clear. By that evening, I'd written out a short agenda and called the family to meet me at the condo the next day. I didn't tell them what it was about, only that we needed to talk. Natalie sounded annoyed on the phone. Eric didn't say anything. My dad muttered something about being busy, but they all agreed to show up. I arrived early. The place looked the same neat, comfortable lived-in. My mom was the first to walk in, followed by Natalie and Eric. Then my dad, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. We all sat down in the living room. No one offered me a seat or asked how I was doing. I didn't wait for small talk. I opened the folder and laid the lease agreement on the table. Then I said, starting next month, the rent will be $2,800. That's the current market rate. If you're not able to pay, you'll have 30 days to move out. No one spoke at first. Natalie blinked like she hadn't heard me. Eric sat up straighter, his jaw tight. My mom looked at her hands. My dad leaned forward. "You're serious," he said. I nodded. "After everything we've done for you," he asked, his voice rising. I didn't respond. Natalie let out a sharp breath. "You know we can't pay that." "Then you'll need to find a new place," I said. "I've been carrying this for years. I'm done." Eric looked at me like he was trying to figure out if this was a bluff. My mom opened her mouth once, then closed it again. My dad stood up. "You're ungrateful," he said. "We gave you everything, your education, your start in life." I looked him in the eye. "You gave me a work ethic. I've used it." No one moved. I stood, gathered the folder, and said I'd follow up with written notice. As I walked to the door, Natalie said something under her breath that I didn't catch. I didn't stop. By the time I got home, the texts had already started coming in. Natalie sent a long one, a full screen of accusations and disappointment, saying I was tearing the family apart over money. Eric called me selfish. My mom sent a single line, "Think about Chloe." I didn't respond to any of them. 2 days later, my dad called again. His voice was low, tight. "Why did the rent account get closed?" I said calmly. "Because I'm not living off you anymore." He went quiet. Then after a pause, he snapped, "You owe us. We're your family." I didn't answer right away. Then I said 30 days. Pay or leave. And I hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a while after that, staring at the window. I wasn't angry, not exactly, but something had solidified. A weight I'd been carrying without realizing it had finally shifted. They could yell guilt threaten, but they couldn't undo what had already happened. The morning after I told my dad they had 30 days, I woke up to a new wave of messages. Natalie had posted a photo of the condo kitchen, my kitchen, with a caption that read, "When your sister turns into a landlord overnight." The comments weren't from strangers. They were from cousins, mutual friends, old classmates. Some called me greedy. One wrote, "Family doesn't do that to family." Another said, "Some people forget where they come from." I didn't reply. I took screenshots, saved every one of them. Later that evening, I got a text from a number that wasn't saved in my phone. It was short. "Push this further and your condo won't stay so perfect." No name, no photo, just those words. I stared at the screen for a while, then forwarded the message to Tyler. He called a few minutes later, his voice steady but sharp. "They're trying to scare you," he said. "You're not wrong to set a boundary. Don't let them pull you back in." He told me to document everything: the message, the social media posts, the lease terms. I added them all to the folder, printing out copies and tucking them behind the agreement I'd signed the day I closed on the condo. The next day, I drove over to the property to check on a hallway light they said was flickering. I didn't call ahead. I used my key, walked in quietly, and found the place empty. No voices, no TV, no shoes by the door. I replaced the bulb in less than 5 minutes. As I walked back through the living room, I noticed something on the side of the sofa. A thick black line, jagged permanent, cut across the cream-colored armrest like someone had taken a marker to it in a single, angry stroke. I stood there for a moment staring at it. The marker hadn't bled or faded. It was fresh. I pulled out my phone and took pictures from every angle. I didn't call anyone. I didn't leave a note. I got back in my car and called a cleaning service. They quoted me $200 to try removing the stain, but couldn't promise it would work. I booked it anyway. Then I called Tyler. When he picked up, I just said they damaged the furniture. He paused. "On purpose, it wasn't there before," I said. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said, "You need to take this seriously. It's not just about money anymore." By the time I got home, I'd made a decision. I emailed everything to my attorney, the screenshots, the lease, the message from the blocked number, and now the photos of the sofa. He called me back the same day. "We can proceed with formal notice if they don't pay," he said. "What you're showing me, especially the text, that's enough to start an eviction process if needed." I nodded as he spoke, even though he couldn't see me. He said it might get messy, but the law was on my side. After the call, I printed the notice template and filled out the details just in case. The following morning, I returned to the condo again. This time, I walked through each room. I wasn't looking for more damage, I just needed to see it for myself. Everything looked untouched until I stepped into Chloe's room. On her desk was a small crayon drawing, a stick figure family standing under a rainbow. I paused. I folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into my bag. Back at home, I placed it in a drawer near my desk. Then I called my attorney and gave him the green light to send the notice. The countdown had started. The 30 days passed quicker than I expected. On day 29, I got an email from Natalie. No greeting, no explanation, just a short message that said they couldn't afford the new rent and would be moving out by the end of the week. There was no apology, no mention of the years they'd lived there under market rate. Just a cold confirmation, as if it had all been a business transaction from the start. I drove to the condo the morning they were supposed to leave. Tyler offered to come with me, but I told him I needed to handle it alone. The doorman buzzed me in, gave me a polite nod, though he didn't say much. The place was quiet. My key turned easily in the lock. Inside, it looked like they were gone. The furniture I'd provided was still there, but the space felt emptied, not just of people, but of warmth. I walked through the living room first. The same cream-colored sofa still sat under the front window, the marker slash across the armrest, just as bold as the day I'd found it. But it was the hallway mirror that stopped me. The full-length glass panel, the one I'd installed near the front door when I first moved in, was shattered. Cracks spidered out from the center and across the middle, scratched into the reflective surface. With something sharp was one word: Greedy. I stood there for a moment, then pulled out my phone and took pictures. Each angle, every shard. I didn't touch anything. Just documented. My lawyer had warned me this might happen, that damage, even petty or spiteful, wasn't uncommon when people felt cornered. He told me to be ready to stay calm. I called him from the condo. When he picked up, I said they're out, but they didn't leave it clean. He told me to log the damage and consider filing a claim for the cost. I said I'd think about it. Cleaning up took most of the day. I started with the broken mirror, sweeping up the glass carefully so I wouldn't cut myself. I called a repair service to replace it. They quoted $300. The sofa I knew was past saving. The ink had set deep into the fabric. I scheduled a pickup with a hauler and began searching for a replacement. As I worked, I found small things left behind: a glittery sticker on the fridge door, a plastic bracelet tucked between couch cushions, one of Chloe's hair ties caught in the hallway vent. They weren't deliberate, just traces, reminders of a child caught in the middle. I set those aside gently. By the next morning, I was ready to move forward. I called my real estate agent, the same one who'd helped me buy the place years ago, and told her I wanted to list the unit at market rate. $2,800, she asked. I said yes. She didn't hesitate. Within 48 hours, we had interest from more than a dozen applicants. I spent the weekend reviewing them, trying to be careful. I wasn't looking for sympathy. I just wanted someone who would treat the space with respect. One couple stood out. A young doctor and her husband, both professionals, both with solid references. They toured the condo on a Wednesday afternoon and told me without flinching that the rent was more than fair. I signed the lease that weekend. Before they moved in, I made one last visit to the condo. The new mirror had been installed bright and clear. The old sofa was gone, and I left the living room open for them to furnish themselves. I walked slowly through each room, checking corners, wiping surfaces, making sure everything felt right. In the kitchen, I found something tucked beneath a magnet on the fridge. A small folded note. The paper was pink and the handwriting uneven. "I'm sorry, Aunt Hannah." It was signed by Chloe. I folded it once, slipped it into my bag, and locked the door behind me. The new tenants moved in on the 1st of the month. They brought their own furniture, modern, simple, with clean lines and soft colors. When they thanked me for having the place ready, I nodded and handed over the keys. There was no ceremony, no lingering, just a clear exchange the way it should be. Later that evening, I stood by my kitchen window, the condo no longer in view, but still in mind. Tyler came over with takeout and 2 glasses. We sat on the couch, plates balanced on our knees, soft music playing in the background. When I told him it was done, leased, settled, full market rent, he smiled and said, "You did it." The next day I dropped off a copy of the new lease and the photos of the damages to my lawyer's office. We talked briefly about whether to file a claim. He said I was well within my rights. I said I'd let him know. I wasn't sure I needed to chase anything more. A week passed, then 2. The house was quiet. My phone quieter. One afternoon I heard through a cousin that my parents, Natalie, Eric, and Chloe, had moved in with my aunt in Northeast Philly. A small row house, 1 bathroom. My dad had picked up extra shifts doing maintenance at a warehouse, and Natalie was working weekends at the boutique. I listened, nodded, and said nothing. There was a dull ache in hearing they were struggling. Not regret, just the kind of ache that comes from knowing it didn't have to be this way. A few days later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a folded letter on lined paper, decorated with hearts in purple crayon. "Dear Aunt Hannah, thank you for letting us live in your house. I miss you. Love, Chloe." Tucked inside was a photo of her at a park holding a stuffed bear. I stood by the counter reading it once, then again. I didn't write back. Not yet. But I placed the note beside the crayon drawing from her bedroom, the stick figure family under the rainbow. I didn't want to forget that part of it. As the months passed, Tyler and I shifted into new routines. We started planning our wedding, small, quiet, with friends who'd stood by us through it all. We booked a venue in Fairmount Park. Nothing fancy, Just one room with wood floors, big windows, and space for a few tables and music. My parents weren't invited. Neither were Natalie or Eric. Tyler asked if I was sure. I told him I was. They'd made their choices. I had made mine. When the day came, the sky was clear and cool. I wore a dress with sleeves, simple and soft, and walked down the aisle with steady steps. Sarah, my best friend from college, fixed my veil before the ceremony. Tyler waited at the end of the aisle, hands folded, eyes warm. We read our vows, slowly, careful with each word. After the ceremony, we ate cake under string lights and danced to old songs on a rented speaker. People laughed, glasses clinked, and no one asked about the condo. We took a short honeymoon to a quiet cabin in the Poconos. One night while sitting on the porch, I told Tyler about Chloe's letter. He said maybe one day you can reach out, through her school. Something private. I said maybe. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't closed off, just cautious. Back in Philadelphia, life settled into something new. The condo stayed rented without issue. The couple paid on time, sent kind messages, even left a thank you note after the first month, just a small card that said, "The mirror brightened the hallway." It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd received from my own family in years. I kept Chloe's letter in a frame on the shelf near my desk beside the drawing I'd found in her room. It was the one thing from that chapter I wasn't willing to let go of. I hadn't seen her since they moved out, but I thought about her often. Her small voice, her wide eyes, the way she hugged that framed picture, like it meant something. I didn't hear from my parents, or from Natalie and Eric. Not after the wedding, not after the lease was signed. Maybe they thought I'd come around. Maybe they realized I wouldn't. Either way, the silence held. Some nights Tyler and I would talk about the future, where we might travel, whether we'd want to move someday. The condo came up once or twice more as a footnote than a centerpiece. It had become what it was always supposed to be: an investment, a space with value, not a weight to carry. We made dinner most evenings, nothing fancy. Pasta stir-fry, the occasional burned attempt at lasagna. Sarah came by often, bringing wine or stories from work. Sometimes I'd glance at the frame note on the shelf and think about how much one voice could still matter. I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost the version of family I thought I was supposed to protect. But in its place, I had something quieter and stronger. Peace, partnership, a home that didn't ask me to shrink. I used to think standing up for myself would feel like slamming a door. It didn't. It felt more like unlocking one I hadn't realized was closed and stepping through. I don't know what will happen with Chloe down the road. I hope one day when the time's right, we'll find a way to stay in each other's lives. Not through guilt or pressure, but through choice. And if you've ever had to draw a line like that, if you've ever had to walk away to reclaim your own name, just know it's okay to do so without anger. Dignity doesn't raise its voice. Thanks for listening to my story. If it stayed with you, share where you're tuning in from, or tell me about the moment you knew it was time to stop carrying what wasn't yours. Take care of yourself. And when you can be the kind of family someone wants to keep.